Morning, Revive. See if I'm on here. All right, I got green. Okay, so if you're visiting with us this morning, if you haven't been here in a couple of weeks, we've started a series called Fixer Upper. And it's based on Scripture, and it's based on God's leading, but as an illustration, we're using the show Fixer Upper. Is anybody familiar with that show? Okay, it's one of the remodeling shows that's on cable TV or on satellite. And what we've done so far, we've talked about, and as a church, we lean really heavily, I've noticed, and it wasn't intentional, on the parable of the wise man and the foolish man. They're found at the end of Matthew 7, where it talks about, hey, the wise man is the one that hears the sayings of mine, it's Jesus speaking, and puts them into practice. He's like a man who dug down to the foundation and built his house on the rock. And when the storm came, like the storms come in all of our lives, the storm blew on that house and it didn't fall. And the foolish man is the one that hears the sayings of mine and doesn't do them. He's like the one who built his house on the sand, didn't dig down to the foundation. And when the storm came in his life, it blew his house over, and great was the ruin of that house. So we started off in week 1, and we talked about demo day. So if we're going to put off the old man and put on the new man, if we're going to tear down our old self and let God rebuild us a new self, what we got to do is get rid of all the garbage. We've got to clean house and say, God, hey, I'm ready to build. So the foolish man, he didn't dig that sand that was between him and the foundation. He didn't clear all that out before he started to build. Week 2, we talked about the foundation. And the foundation, the rock that we're trying to get to, that we're trying to follow, is Jesus Christ. And that's where we want to start building. So that's where my lovely wife and I come in this morning. So, we're to plans. Anybody ever asked, a pastor or a spiritual leader, or asked yourself or asked God, hey, what are your plans for me? What are your plans for my life? How do we recognize those? And that's what we want to talk about with you this morning. But I think before we talk about a plan, we've got to talk about a vision. Before we talk about a plan, we have to talk about a vision. If you're ever going to go, I am a notorious dieter. I do it all the time. I quit diets all the time. All the time. And the reason I quit is I lose the vision of wanting to maybe look a little bit thinner and wanting to feel a little bit better. And if I can stay focused on that, I can stay motivated for a workout plan. It's the same like with anything else in life. If we can keep a vision of our goal, then we can execute the plan. The plan is just the step-by-step way to get to our goal. And that's what we want to share with you this morning. God has a unique plan for each of us, and it's based on who we are. It's based on the situation we're in, and it's based on the people that we're going to impact. So this morning we're going to share a little bit about who we are and how God's plans can coincide with us in a little bit of a different way.
Okay, am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, when you hear the word plans, what do you think about? Do you think about the beginning of starting something? Or do you think about the end result? I am the type of person who I have to have everything in order. I'm a planner. Everything has to be taken care of. So I think of like going on vacation or even weekend trips to Mayfield. I spend all week making sure the house is clean. In case a robber breaks in, I don't want him seeing a mess. I do all that. I pack my clothes, pack my kids' clothes, pack shoes to match every outfit, bows. I spend 3 to 4 days asking Justin, when you going to pack? And I always get the same response. I'll do it in a little while. It drives me crazy. I can't handle it. And usually maybe about an hour before it's time to go somewhere, he's packing his clothes. Do I spend too much time planning and packing things my way? In Proverbs 19:21, it says, "Many are the plans in a man's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." I really don't think God is going to worry that I forgot my hair straightener or my blow dryer and my hair looks a big mess. God's going to care, and He's going to guide me through what to do while I'm looking a mess. Our plans are always going to be our plans, but God's plan is always in place. We should never ever think that we know God's plans. Take Noah and Abraham. God told Noah, "Go and build this ark, because I'm going to flood the earth and destroy everything in it. But if you follow my instructions, you and your family are going to be safe." I'm pretty sure that everybody in here would be okay with those plans and be like, all right, he told me what to do. We're going to go gather our supplies right now. But we all know this story, so look at the end of the story. We could kind of say that Noah had it easy. God told him the exact things to do, down to the exact measurements, and on how to build the ark. I'm not saying that, his task was easy, because it did take him 140 years. But I'm comparing his task to Abraham's. Noah knew exactly what to do and what was going to happen. Abraham, not so much. Sarah and Abraham were finally blessed with their son Isaac. And then God tells Abraham, "Go and take this son that you love so much. Take him on top of a mountain and sacrifice him." He wasn't given any other instructions or didn't know what was going to happen. But he didn't hesitate. He didn't hesitate at all, and without question. He got up the very next morning and headed out to that mountain with Isaac. If we were given these plans, how many of us would jump up the very next morning ready to follow God's plans? When we become followers of Christ and fully commit our lives to Him, it becomes about His plans and not ours. Does that mean that everything's going to be perfect and great and easy and happy in our lives? No, it doesn't. We're all going to go through storms and heartache and turmoil. But God knows the end of our story. Where we see the storm and all the problems, He always works it out for good. Joseph went through years of heartache and issues, being sold into slavery by his own brothers, thrown into prison for something that he didn't even do. But he never let his faith diminish. God knew what his end result would be. But Joseph didn't even, after all of that happened to him, Joseph didn't know his end results. Even after all that happened to him, he tells his brothers in Genesis 50:20 that you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. God does give us the free will to make our own decisions, but He already knows what is going to happen in the end. When we give our lives to Him and fully commit, we do pay a price. It might be being mocked by non-believers, being made fun of because you don't want to participate in stuff that your friends are doing. It can be the price of very, very many things. But when we commit ourselves to God's plan and pay that price, we aren't saying, "I'm following you so you can make everything in my life great and perfect." You're actually saying to God, "Give me, but also take away everything that you see fit." When we go through these trials and hardships in life, it's hard to see the good. But just remember, we may not know the end, but God does, and it's going to be good.
God's got plans for us. God's got plans for each and every one of us. Sometimes based off of our free will, which is, by the way, sometimes one of the worst gifts we could have been given, and the best all at the same time. Because if it wasn't for free will, we wouldn't be in the mess we're in. But if it wasn't for free will, love wouldn't have the opportunity to exist, because love is not love if it's not given freely. So it can kind of cause this big mess if we're not careful. Do you mind if I rob your stand?
Sure.
Okay. Sure rhymes with Noah.
What?
Sure rhymes with Noah. So does God have a plan? Any serious follower of Jesus has asked this question. I don't know how you can be a serious follower of Christ and not say, "Hey, does God have a plan for my life?" And then especially if you're in a mess, whether you got yourself into it or whether the mess was just thrown on you, or if you're in the middle of some sort of tragedy, we all say, hey, God, what is your plan in all this? I'm having trouble seeing how this can work out in a way that is good in any kind of way. I'm having trouble seeing, like, what is this going to produce? In Proverbs 29:18, I talked a little bit at the beginning about having a vision. And I put the wrong verse on there. The verse basically says this. I'm not going to quote it word for word, but it says, without a vision, my people perish. And they forget to walk in my ways, or they forget my law. Okay? So when there's no vision, right, all these things that God are asking us to do seem less and less and less important. Our ultimate goal is to be with Christ in all eternity in heaven. Right? If we lose sight of that, if we lose sight of hope, if we lose the faith that God is taking us through this to something much, much better, we start to fall apart. So the thing I think we struggle with the most, and I don't care how long you've been at this Jesus thing, the thing that we struggle with the most is, okay, how do I recognize if this is God's will or my will? Anybody ever wrestle with that? A constant battle. Is this me? Is this usually Satan's pretty easy to figure out if we're really looking. But is this God's will for me, or is this something I just want for myself and I'm trying to get God on board? A lot of times if we're not careful, it's not really about, hey, God, what's your plan for my life? It's like, hey, God, here's my plan for your life, and here's how you can help me out. Right? Really, seriously. But I just want to give us a few things this morning to help us know if it's God's plan or not. Number one is that God's plan is always going to follow the playbook. Okay? God's plan is always going to follow the playbook. If it contradicts a commandment given in Scripture, it's not God's plan. Okay? If you're in a marriage and you're seeing something somewhere else that looks like grass greener on the other side, it's not God's plan. If somebody makes you mad and you're wanting to go maul them and beat them up, that's not God's plan. Right? It's not God's plan. God is never going to ask you to break the law to fulfill His plan. Now, the good news is that God is a God of restoration. God is a God of restoration. When I was around 8 years old, my parents split. That was not God's plan A. I don't believe that wasn't God's plan. I don't know. I was 8. I don't know what all happened. Just so happens my mom's here this morning. And it was harmful to all of us, everybody involved, mom, dad, the family, and still to this day, there's still some turmoil, with getting grandkids. Who are they going to go see, and this, this kind of stress that I don't believe was God's plan A. But God, the good news is God is a God of restoration and redemption, because when plan A, when we decided in our own way, and I can say this about my own life, but when we have God gives us plan A. We divert, we rebel, we go the other way. God already has a plan B in store. I want you to hear me out on this, because if you don't catch all of what I'm saying, you might question what I'm getting ready to tell you. Jesus was plan B. Plan B is not always bad. God's plan A was to make the creation and to have Adam and Eve and mankind to walk in harmony with Him and live in the garden with Him forever. But when man fell, when we rebelled against God and we sinned, got cast out of the garden, God already had a plan B in place. He told us in Genesis 3. Isn't that awesome? But God has got a plan for our hope and got a plan for our future. Another way that we can recognize what God's plan for us is that it always has to do with who we are as a Christian and a follower of Christ and who we're going to impact. And very rarely does it have anything to do with what I can achieve or what I can earn, or what I can store up for myself. It always has to do with who God is trying to make you into as far as character goes. Now, riches can be a part of that. We can learn that from Job. But it's not the main purpose. It's not God's main plan. That's not what He's doing. So if we think about that, it's always about who God is trying to mold me into. I'm a high school football coach. We do a lot of conditioning. We got to do a lot of stuff that people just don't do if you don't have somebody making you do it. But they all know that, hey, this is going to make me faster. It's going to make me stronger. It's going to get me more prepared to have success. I don't like going through what I'm going through right now, but I have my eyes on the goal. Just think about, if you an athlete going through all that strenuous preseason workouts and all those things that we do, if we don't have a trophy at the end, what are we doing? Really? I mean, we all love to watch our sports, but if they didn't crown a champion at the end of the year, how interested would we be? Really? So you work in 2 Timothy 2:15 or 2:5. Paul even talks about athletics. He said the one who wins the race isn't crowned unless he walks according to the rules. So Jan actually said something that wasn't true about me. I wait till much later than an hour before we're going to go somewhere to get ready. Not a lot. I mean, it's usually fun. She was being nice to me. She didn't want you to think bad about me.
I don't do that very often.
But she was talking about the story of Abraham. And when I see what Noah was given, I'm telling you, God knows us personally, and He knows how we tick. And He always plans stuff that way, it seems like. Because Jan can look at it and say, oh, that would be perfect. He's going to give me all these tasks, and I can work my butt. I know exactly what I've got to do. I don't have to have any anxiety about the future. To me, I'm like, you want me to spend 100 years building a boat? I'm not cut out that way. You know what? Just point me in the right direction and give me one simple task that I can handle at a time, and hopefully we'll eventually get there. All right, so God He gave Noah a completely different, and not a less important, but a completely different task than He gave Abraham. When Abraham was first called, He just says, hey, pack up your stuff and go, and then after you leave, I'll tell you where you're going.
That's His kind of That's His kind of plan.
Let's just go somewhere where let's let's throw a dartboard at the map and go on vacation. No, that's not going to fly with her. So it can seem scary and overwhelming. Both of them had to believe in God's future and had to believe the vision that God gave for them. In Noah's case, the earth was going to be flooded. In Abraham's case, that through his seed, all of the world would be blessed. They'd be numerous as the sand of the seashore. He had to believe in that vision before he was going to set foot away from what he knew. We're going to look at Genesis 21, verses 12 and 13 first. Because I think this is important. When we think about God asking Abraham to sacrifice his son, that's kind of, I don't really know what God's up to there. You got to remember, one thing you need to know is that Abraham came from a culture where child sacrifice was the way that you pleased the gods. And this was one of God's ways of showing it, hey, I'm different. Let's look here. But God said to Abraham, do not let it be displeasing in your sight because of the lad or because of your bondwoman, whatever Sarah has said to you. Listen to her voice, for in Isaac your seed shall be called. Yet I will also make a nation of the son of the bondwoman because he is your seed. Now, I don't know if you're familiar with the story. God promised them they'd have a child and they got tired of waiting. So Sarah finds another woman for Abraham to have a child with. And now we have a Christian-Muslim war that started right there. Okay? God had a plan B and a restoring plan for Abraham. But the repercussions of him diverting and rebelling against God are still felt today. Right? So when we rebel against God and we think, hey, I'm not really hurting anybody, if I were to leave for someone else and God it'd be like a plan Z for me, but hopefully he goes past the alphabet. And it all worked out. Well, at the same time, if I influenced 10 people to do the same thing that I did, through all the course of time until Christ returns, I might have just broken up 200,000 families by people seeing what I did and say, hey, he's a Christian, he did it. And then there's this wave of repercussion that goes out everywhere. God is a restoring God and He's a redeeming God. So we're going to go to Genesis 22, verses 1 through 18. I'm going to do a lot of reading, so please try to bear with me. Now it came to pass after these things that God tested Abraham and said to him, Abraham. Abraham said, here I am. Then He said, take your son, your only son Isaac, who you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. Again, hey, I'll show you the mountain when you're already on your way. So Abraham rose early in the morning and saddled his donkey and took 2 of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and he split the wood for the burnt offering and arose, and went to the place which God had told him. Then on this 3rd day, Abraham lifted his eyes and saw the place afar off. Listen to what Abraham says. And Abraham says to his young men, stay here with the donkey, The lad and I will go yonder and worship, and we will come back to you. What did he tell him to do with Isaac? Abraham believed the promise. He said, if I set him on fire, if I stab him with a knife, whatever, God's going to bring him back to life. God always comes through on his promises, and he promised through this son that my seed would be established, that we'd be as numerous as the sand on the seashore. He probably didn't really understand why God was having him do what he was doing, but he knew what God had promised, and he went in faith. And he had so much faith, he said, hey, we'll be back. No, God's not going to kill him. So through that, and I can stop right there, Kevin. Through that prophecy, and even back in Genesis 3, we got the promise of Jesus. That God promised us his son, and whoever believes in his name would be saved. He came through on that promise. And that promise is real as it ever was. The great thing about being a Christian is you know you're going to win. You know you're going to win. I wish coaching football was like that sometimes. It might take some of the fun out of it. But if I already knew I was going to win, I could do a lot less work. That's the great thing. You know, has anybody ever watched, like you're a big fan of a sports team, and not only do you watch the game live, but you turn around and watch the replay, especially if you win? Do you watch it differently? Why do you watch it different? Because you know the end. When your team throws an interception,
You're not as angry.
no. You know why? Because I know the outcome. When the other team hits a three-pointer and put me down by one, with 1 second to go, I don't panic. I know the outcome. If the outcome was bad, I'm not watching it again. So we don't have to panic when we get into these situations because God has got a plan. And he knows the outcome. And we win. No matter what life takes us through, we win. God loves you, and he's got a plan for you.
God does some of his best work when you are asleep. That is, in the dark. He does his best work when you don't think he's doing a thing. He's behind the scenes, working it out. I have a plan, and it's a good one. Maybe you should have gotten it earlier in your life. Maybe you should. Maybe if you hadn't done this or done that, or gone here or gone there, then maybe you would have gotten it early. Maybe if you'd have gotten saved earlier, you would have known me earlier, you would have had the plan. Maybe so. Maybe if you hadn't married out of my will, or if you hadn't traveled out of my will, or you hadn't been in rebellion, maybe you would have gotten it early. And I know you wish you could turn back the hands of time and make it happen all over again. And I know you feel like you've been in this thing too long. And I know you don't know how much longer it's going to take to get out of it. But still, with all your questions, I have a plan for you. And I know what it is. And it's a good one. And it will give you a future. And it will give you a hope. You don't know which way to go? Seek him. You're in pain? Seek him. You're confused? Seek him. You're tired of waiting? Seek him. If you come and ask me, I'm going to send you back to him because he has not told me his plan. A lot of us have a picture, but we can't see a plan. So we wonder whether it's going to produce anything. God says, I have the plan. 2,000 years ago. Jesus Christ put up the paper for the plan. And he who has begun a good work in you shall continue it until the day of redemption. What God starts, God finishes. What God begins, God ends. What God initiates, God completes. But you say, I'm in a mess. You don't know my mess. You don't know my God. And if you forget the sermon, remember the verse. I have a plan for you. Not for calamity or bad, but for good. And it involves your future. Fully.